The next step then for us is to figure out how do we actually get gradient to work for us in particular ranges. Okay, so this is where you're going to have to use what's called dispatch. And we used it before, but we used it in a slightly different way. We used it to reorganize and redirect lists of information to be used for patterning. In this case, in this particular case, we only have one bit of information, or technically two in comparison. But we have the site and we have the footprint of the building or the blob. So it's a little bit simpler, I think, to look at it that way. So let's, you can turn your edit points off for now. But let's get rid of that panel and let's start to look at what we can do with this particular number. Okay, the feature we're going to use is dispatch, or the component we're going to use is dispatch, and that's under set, list, and dispatch. So let's study what it's actually going to do. We have the list to filter, and then we have the dispatch pattern. And that pattern is going to be either true or false, right? So we can establish a true trigger or a false trigger based off of essentially larger than, right, or smaller than, whatever you want to analyze, right? So let's go into math and operators, and let's just go with, let's go with smaller than, okay? So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to test a number to test, for whether or not it is larger, or whether or not it is smaller than number b, right? So, or equal, depending on which one we pull as our output. You're correct. So we just basically need to take that number a, and that's going to be our testing number, which is our percentage of the site. And we're going to test whether or not it's smaller than a certain value that we give it. Okay, so our test, for me at least, is going to be, is this blob less than 50% of the site, right? Because let's say our design task is that we cannot establish a building that covers more than 50% of the site. So I'll grab my param, go here, and I'm going to say 0.5. That's 50%. Okay, so what we get is that this says, when you hover over it, it says false. Now, if I plug that into my pattern, that means that it's going to dispatch a particular direction. So the number still goes through if I plug in my number to my list, right? And it's going to get dispatched to B. Does that make sense? 56.325. Right, but it's not truly the number that we want, is it?
So what if mine says it's true? Just because my size is smaller.
That would mean, yeah, your footprint or blob is smaller. So I mean, in the interest of being perfectly aligned, you could increase it if you want, but it's probably not that critical. So anyway, guys, what we have here is our particular pattern saying it's false, and so therefore whatever information we feed into L, in this case I put in the percentage, is going to get broken out into group B. So instead of the percentage, I'm actually going to take the surface. Okay, so that surface, if it's false, is going to be passed through this, is going to be passed through for B. Okay, so actually it doesn't seem to want to pass through. Trim surface, why isn't it passing through? Oh no, it is, sorry, it is. I was misreading it. Yeah, so it's passed through on B, and that's good because what I can do here is I can set it up for to basically render this out as red, right? Because it's or I'll do orange because red is too close. So I'm going to go into mesh. I'm going to grab my mesh colors. I could just plug that in here, and then I'll go back to params, input, and I'm going to do a color swatch. You guys have seen this a bunch of times before, so I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to do kind of like an orangey red, like that. Is that making sense? You guys need a minute to catch up? Okay, but let me just pause for a moment and say we've only set up a small part of this. Okay, well, I mean, I say a small part of it. It's really just one side of the coin. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to figure out something that makes sense for one particular condition, and then I'm going to backwards engineer it for what the positive condition is going to be. Okay. Okay, guys, real quick, if you guys happen to have a condition where this number is less than 50%, then yours is going to look a little bit different. You should still build it exactly the same way that I built it. And let me just show you real quick what it's going to look like. And this kind of ruins part of the magic, I suppose. But it's going to look like that. Okay, you're not going to have a gradient show up, and you're going to have an orange line here. Okay? You could make it bigger now if you want to be perfectly aligned with mine, but you don't have to.
But if I change the N to the A, it gives me results.
Right, but then it won't be correct because then you're rendering orange for a correct condition. But we want orange to be our incorrect condition. Yeah, you'll understand when we're done. On this, you just turn your edit points on here. Sad face type of thing. All right, now continuing on. So the next step here is to figure out the positive condition. So what I've created, because my goal is to have a building footprint, in this case the blob, to be less than 50%. Right? That's my restriction. So I need to build what's going to happen with the positive case. And unfortunately, that doesn't really exist here. It kind of does. We have our true value, right? So if it's less than or if it's positive. So I need to just, I need to just take this mesh color, change this one to whatever positive color you want. In my case, it's going to be green, and plug that into A. Yeah, well, I mean, yours will either be green or orange depending on what condition you currently have. The beauty of this is that I can take my profile now and very easily just turn my edit points on, and I already told you I killed the magic because I showed you it turning off before. But now, as I reduce this value, it's going to switch from orange to green. Pretty cool, right? Yeah, so it seems pretty simple now. We go from orange to green. Or if you need to kind of just nudge it a little bit, you just pull it ever so slightly. Whoops, sorry. Like that. And eventually it'll say, oh, no, too much. And then you just go back to green. And there you go. Okay? So, this is the simple version. The best thing about these analytics tools is like, yeah, you can build this in if you want, but honestly, in most cases, you're going to know whether or not you're within your building footprint restriction pretty easily. Where this gets really useful is dealing with fenestration. How much percentage of the building is open with windows? How much percentage of the building is covered by a dynamic sunshade that's changing with the angle of the sun? You can basically output positive, negative situations for any system in your building as a comparison to any numerical operator that you're trying to test it against. Does that make any sense? So we're gonna dig into a couple more types of analytics here in a moment, particularly dealing with patterning. So I'm gonna pause this, and we're going to develop another quick pattern definition and look at more of a gradient analysis of a wider range of systems. Okay? So what questions do you have before I move on?
Mine has a red box.
Okay. All right, I'll come check.